Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. We are back with the Ulgansah Witches, Chapter 12. We're going to get right into it. It's a little longer. This one's called Tillaran No Longer. Here we go. After having rested in a cheap inn for the night, Roland and his two spies started their day early by heading out to visit a person who could possibly help. Ford and Stogan each had their own contacts and resources, and both had connections that could lead to information from the local government or king. A most reliable contact with easy access to the castle was not far from the inn. This person ran an open-air vegetable stand adjacent to his home in the market square. Spycraft was a constantly changing game with a fluidity to it that rivals even the most chaotic battlefield. Stogan and Ford both knew this and kept their contacts guarded. Their very lives depended on it. Colors, hand gestures, keywords, and phrases were all important signifiers and tells in the spy game. One of the most important traits that a spy needed to have was a strong and vivid memory. Also needed was the ability to recognize subtle signs and changes. If these things were lacking in any degree, the spy stood a strong chance of ending up discovered or dead. Stogan was good at the game and recognized that his contact in the market square would be easy to approach. In the early morning hours, vegetables, cheese, milk, and fish were sold at a fantastic rate. Even with Senton literally at the gates, there still seemed to be a sizable surplus of goods to be sold. Stogan's contact was busy selling potatoes and carrots to a group of 3 or 4 customers at a time during this busy morning without any subside to the rush. The information trade had a currency all its own to avoid detection even in a throng like this. Stogan stepped up solo to gain what he could from the brine broker of hidden information. "Sir, any belts for sale?" Stogan asked, squeezing his way towards the busy booth. "My leather is gone. Have a potato, half price this morning only," replied the seller. The potatoes were half price, but the comments about belts and leather were the start of identifying and verifying needs from each spy. "Have you any silk belts?" Stogan asked. "Only one left. It's green, my good man." The marketeer had to make several sales in between responses. "Very good. I'll take the purple one." "Right-o. One moment, sir." The salesman finished 2 other requests from impatient customers, then darted to the back of his stall while his young assistant, who looked like it could be his son, kept the sales going. After a brief moment, the marketeer returned and went to the side of the booth display. He had a purple silk belt and stretched out his hands to offer it to Stogan. In return, Stogan handed him a silver loran as payment and gave a sound thanks for the exchange. He quickly felt a small vial that had been wrapped within the silk, then tucked it away as inconspicuously as he could. No one saw the actual exchange. The first contact had been successfully made. Stogan took his time leaving the market, buying a couple more items in order to avoid suspicion or unwanted attention. There was one lady who seemed to notice him, but it was more of a physical attraction than information. Stogan brushed off the long flirtatious stares from the woman and left without further inconveniences. It was still on the early side of the morning when Stogan returned to the company of his companions. Only then did he open the vial and found the hastily written message that it contained. "What do we have?" Ford was used to the work, having been in the spycraft for many years. His question was as cool as asking an old friend to pass salt at meal. "Do you know any soldiers at the seaside gate to the palace? We are to meet a man named Hilden there. He will lead us inside," Stogan spoke as he looked over the note. "There were 2 men named Hilden that worked at the palace 6 moons ago. Only one do I know. Are there any markers on the note?" "Yes, we have a small cross under the name. Is this the man you know? Stogan asked. It is. The cross is the mark he chose. Any specified time? There's the mishap letter indicating high moon. Late tonight is our contact time. You gentlemen do well. I am honored and fascinated by your skill. Let's find something to do until tonight. Roland moved away from the alley wall that he had been leaning on, then started to lead the men out of the back alley that they had been using. Just before they exited, Roland had a new request. Stogan, return to our men, give them an update, then send news of Senton being here at Brine. The Queen needs to know quickly. Stogan didn't need any other orders. He quickly made good use of the day and returned to Roland's detachment in the woods. The rest of the day for Roland and Ford was used up by gaining information about the city and how its people felt about current events on the continent. In the markets, a blacksmith shop, and the docks all had stories and bits of information that Roland and Ford listened to intently. When evening was upon them and over dinner, they had the final scrap of information relayed to them by their server. Casually, the lady made mention of 2 Senton soldiers that had become overconfident and drunk. Talk of Senton's armies marching indirectly towards Webben was revealed, and most alarming. Roland felt it was now urgent to finish his work in Brine, then head home to Dawson as swiftly as possible. High moon had come, and the city had started to become silent. Sleep was overtaking much of the citizenry, but not for Roland and Ford. The two had arrived at their destination after the early evening guards had retired for the night, and a new pair took their posts by the small seaside gate. Their duty was to not only be the preventers of intrusion into the gardens just beyond the gate, but also an alarm if there was any significant force approaching the palace from the north. Before Roland and Ford came within 10 feet of the gate, they were commanded to halt by the guard. They did so without hesitation, but also Roland found it an opportune time to reveal the silk belt that he had stored in his shoulder bag. Upon seeing the purple silk, the guard that was walking up to inspect the pair of intruders stopped and considered the token. Menevag, the guard asked. Hail, Hindle. You are correct, replied Roland. You are expected inside. Please follow me. Hindle gestured towards the gate with his left hand. Hindle whistled to guardsmen who were far inside the garden, and after a brief moment, 2 more guards presented themselves. The gate was then opened, with Roland and Ford being ushered inside. The king wishes to meet with you. He is waiting, one of the new guards spoke, then led the way through the garden into the North Palace entrance. Brine was always known to be a gem among the cities, and the palace interior was no different. Smooth stonework comprised the floors and walls, with tapestries and a few carbide crystals to light the hallways, made for an elegant grandeur. Carbide was rare outside of Webben, making the expense of the palace much more opulent. The second and third floors of the palace had different colors, themes, and wood floors. All was beautiful and built with a great deal of pride by all observable measures. The third floor at the far northwest side of the palace had the king's study. Here was where Roland was introduced to the king of Brine. Formalities of introductions and guard duty was swift. The king of Brine seemed unsettled, quick of speech, and eager to start a private conversation with Roland and his spy. You are brave men to seek an audience with me. I am sure that you noticed the force of Senton camped out at the gates. What makes you believe that you could just walk right into and visit with me? Did you not consider that I am an ally with Senton? I could have you killed, turned over to the Senton general camped on my northeast gates, or tossed into the sea. You may speak freely, be forthright and quick. King Titus spoke with a deliberate and almost intimidating tone. He wasn't a particularly large man, but he was no way a weak leader in stature or personality. Roland did not bow or give any gesture of being subordinate to the king. It was a bold thing to do, but it was how all people of Ag acted. King Titus, I have heard of your reasonable judgment. And seeing that you are set upon by the army of Senton, this led me to believe that I had an equal chance to be heard or killed. The risk of death seemed outweighed by the need to be a diplomat. You know that I am not fond of Ag. Your people are given too much freedom. They will rebel, betray, or revolt against your monarch someday. That is how peasants are. It's how they think. But as much as your style of government disturbs me, I never thought of taking advantage of the weakness. I never thought of fostering insurrections or defections within your borders. It seems, though, that it doesn't much matter now. King Vanders wants your lands, your people, and all of your gold for himself. There is nothing that I can do to help. So by coming here, you could have been wasting my time and yours. There is a slim chance your people might survive. And if your wizards can muster up some strength in their old age, you might actually win for a time. Just about all that I can do is wish you luck. That, and perhaps a little bit of hope. The latter remains to be seen. Roland was taken with a bit of surprise by how Titus spoke, the words he used, and the hint of hope. I came from Dawson in hopes of discovering why your trade with us had stopped. Outside, I saw the armies of Senton and altered my mission in hopes of discovering why you have allowed their troops at your gates. Now you tell me of hope and a chance for my country to survive. I feel there is a lot that I do not know. And since I am still without chains in your prison or have my head removed, I infer that there are things still for me to discover. What is it, good king, that must be said or done in order for me to know your thoughts? Roland spoke with respect in hopes that his words could reveal what Titus was concealing from him. Titus gestured to Roland and Ford to the window that faced the sea. Look there. Tell me what you discover on the horizon. After a moment, both Roland and Ford's eyes adjusted to look out into the dark. Out on the far horizon, towards where the island nation called Tillaran had once existed, there was a glow on the water that should not be. Out there on the island, there were lights, a great many of them. The two looked at each other with amazement. Titus saw their reaction to finally seeing the light reflecting out on the distant sea. Tillaran. Yes, we have seen those lights for a few months now. It has been cursed, dead for 200 years. You should know the story of the last Mage Star. You know that it gave birth to the death wind that swept throughout our lands and out to sea. The mage called Mira fueled her magic powers of death by eliminating almost all life. She was an unstoppable disease that suffered few to live, all to keep her powers above all ability to subvert. When she was finally killed, she had left only 500 on the continent alive, then met her own end at Tillaran. The stories of the heroes that had killed her while she slept told of bodies piled all across the island. They said the air was unbreathable and toxic from all the rot and decay. They say she swore out a curse at her last breath as she awoke from her dagger in her chest. That island should not be inhabited, and yet there are lights. My advisors tell me it is part of the curse, marking the 200 years that passed since the old mage died. I don't believe it, or I should. It is difficult to shake the fears of the old days and past atrocities. But something out there has changed, and I have yet been able to find a captain who will sail out there. I had ordered 2 ships to go, but they promptly abandoned their mission and sailed off to the west. And now that Senton is at my very doorsteps, they won't allow any ships to go anywhere without their approval. They send observers and advisors on every ship at every launch. We are at their mercy. I don't have any force large enough to free us from their siege, and I do not have a captain who is willing to investigate Tillaran. But I can accomplish 2 things with little risk now that you are here. Ford spoke up during the pause of Titus's revelations. We could guess one thing. You would ask one of us to go and discover what has happened to the island. To have a foe at your gates that you cannot defy, and a curse on your shores from an ancient enemy is cause for alarm. But what do we get from it? Other than our lives, it seems of no use to our country and why we came here. Titus turned to grin just a little at the man. That is where you are quite wrong. If one of you go, I will make sure that you get what meager supplies that I can offer, shipped to your country clandestinely. We have a few ships still out there that never come to port. They are doing my bidding without the eyes of Sinton. I have been waiting for such an opportunity. One of those ships you are able to take command of, General Roland. Set sail to Tillaran and discover what has changed. As soon as you leave, I will do the other thing that I hinted at. There is some serious news about the forces of Sinton that you should know. I will give that news to your friend here, once I know you have set sail. By doing so, if Sinton is victorious, I have lost nothing. But if by some miracle Ag survives, I will have contributed to the success of a trade partner. You do see my logic, do you not? Roland thought for only a moment before he replied. I assume you asked me to be captain of the ship since you know little of the nature of my companion, and yet my country needs me at Dawson. Would it be agreeable to have Ford take command? With little hesitation and a bit of impatience to his tone, Titus forced out his words in agitation. Your man is a spy. Yes, my gatekeeper informed me. You, General, I know to be an accomplished sailor as well as a warrior. You are to go to Tillaran, then return and inform me what lurks on my northeastern shores. You will leave within the hour. The hour came, and the dinghy that carried Roland to his ship had gone off into the darkened sea. When news of his departure reached Titus, he informed Ford the remainder of his information. It was terrible and disparaging, causing Ford to almost lose his control and composure. The news was that Sinton had 35,000 troops headed on their march towards the seaside city of Dawson. End of chapter 12.